Hello class, decided to do my project on my girlfriend's father, Ronald Rayhorn. Spent 26 years as active duty military in the Air Force. For the last 13 years he's been retired and working as a DoD civilian. Most of his jobs have been as a broadcast journalist, directly overseeing radio and television operations at overseas locations. While in the military, he managed 3 armed forces radio networks and trained broadcast journalists. Currently, he works at the Defense Information School at Fort Meade as a department head in the Broadcast Operations Department. Trains military broadcast journalists and engineers, does employment and media interviews, averages about 8 a month. When he became an expert interviewer, to him, he really is not one, because every time he conducts an interview, he learns more or something different that he then turns around and applies to become a better interviewer. When hiring for a work position, he evaluates the qualifications for the position and interviews candidates until he finds one that truly meets the job qualifications. Doesn't do broadcast interviews anymore. His job now is to teach others how to do broadcast interviews for the media. In his free time, he volunteers at his church and does local interviews for church social and events to find out his goals and what he needs. He sees if there is a strong story or message to be told, and that helps him define what he needs to do. As far as skills, he teaches as-needed interview classes, so he does research constantly to stay up to date on new interview techniques and recommendations. He always believes that there's never a status quo. There's always something better he can do or keep developing his skills. As far as culture and gender, he says really doesn't affect him that much because he always looks at his interviewee and phrases questions in a way that's respectful to him. Some of his role models are Merv Block, which used to be a CBS News staff writer for Walter Cronkite, and Steve Hartman, who currently does CBS News stories. If you want to look for a good one, he says to Google D-Day and Steve Hartman, and there's a really heartbreaking story on there. One of his best interviews, he conducted a over-the-phone interview with a woman in Alaska. She had a very dry sense of humor that came across real well, made her sound like a real good candidate. So they decided to hire her. However, when they met her in person, those communication skills did not carry over and didn't make her a good candidate. His worst interview would have to be any interview he does with candidates that are unprepared to be interviewed or that are dishonest. Kurt recently did one for the church, interviewing a homeless couple for winter relief, and turned out that they lied to get in, and it really caused some problems. Some interview advice he says is develop great listening skills. Research, especially if you're going to be interviewed. Best way to increase your chances of getting a job. Know something about the company. Be sure you identify your goals and objectives out front if you're interviewing so you know what to look for. Prefer open-ended to single-answered questions like yes or no or true-false questions. Open-ended questions bring out what you want to know from the person you're interviewing or the interviewee or interviewer. Always be aware of body language and making eye contact and being interested. Let the person know you're engaged. As far as references go, I was interested to learn more about his business, so I went to the Defense Information School website, which is www.dinfos.dma.mil. And the other person I interviewed was his wife, Heather, who helps him do some interviews at work and also help out with the church interviews. Thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoy this interview.